All right, so our next topic is operating systems. Is it time for a change? And Joel agrees that it is definitely time for a change. And I completely 100% agree with him because we both agree that it is time for a change. Moving on. No, why don't you agree that it is time for change?
Because I actually think that there's plenty of interesting stuff that's happened in the past already that we just haven't caught up with. Like, a lot of the operating systems...
Like Palm?
Like what?
Palm operating? Like Palm OS?
Palm? Palm was interesting, but Palm... Not really. I'm thinking more of like...
That was a joke, but thanks
For
for it,
a
actually.
pocket PC then?
No, Pocket PC.
I'm thinking Nokia phones.
Yeah, no. I'm thinking like particularly of the Lisp operating systems. So we don't have an operating system anymore that allows you to modify the operating system while the machine's running. Like you're getting there with like loadable modules in Linux.
So my mom would love that actually.
Yeah, super useful. No, I think that
super useful.
I think that actually.
I think that is kind of the future.
Some of the early operating systems were like very programmer centric. And, surprise, not everyone's a programmer and didn't want to use them, but I think we've lost some of that power. And so I'm excited about things like, what if JavaScript ran in the kernel? Like, it sounds new and like it's this fancy new idea, but it's actually something that we were doing like in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And so I would argue that like there are like step advances, like small advances we've made around,
but I mean, so
garbage collection routines.
It sounds like you are arguing that it is time for change by embracing the things.
The future of the past.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Well, the change is relative to the present.
What was that?
I'm saying? The future, I mean, the change is relative to the present. Should we change what we're doing now?
Well, change usually implies like a positive vector. And I'm saying
it never does.
Does
This
it?
is just a different vector.
No.
Okay.
I mean, so you, along those lines, I think the future, or the present, has enabled a lot of those things possible, to become possible. So, for instance, you brought up, like, Lisp operating systems, I'll just take that a little further, Lisp machines.
Yeah.
So, one of the biggest issues there was the hardware was so expensive.
Yep.
Right? Specialized hardware was extremely cost prohibitive.
Yep.
That's not true anymore.
Right.
You could make a Lisp machine that is actually very cost competitive.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think it's a question of who are these designed for? So back then they were designed for hackers. Today, is there a market for hackers who would actually use those and benefit from them?
Well, I mean, I would argue that Linux was an operating system made for hackers.
And everyone's jumped ship.
Everyone's jumped ship?
It seems like it. I've been using, been my only operating system forever. Everyone's going to Mac OS 10.
Oh, I see.
No, because it has Darwin underbelly. Like, it's just as easy and wonderful, and it provides so much support for all these cool apps and everything, and it's got a cool interface and has cool hardware. Like, Linux sucked, and like the Windows manager sucked. Like, I grew up on Slackware, and then like graduated to whatever fucking distribution somebody came up with that weekend over beers at some hackathon. And it just got tiring to be a part of such almost a constantly evolving world where everyone judged you based upon what you're currently running. And I was just like happy to have something stable that worked.
Yeah, well, it's the last part. It's the people just got tired of when they needed to get something done to actually get their operating system to work.
Well, interestingly, like I'm probably moving back to Linux because I'm running into that with.
It's good to have you.
It's because I'm running into that with Mac OS. I'm like, what? I have to download like another thing to Xcode so I can just compile this shit.
Right.
And like I log into my Ubuntu server and I'm like apt-get install blah 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 and like it's there and I'm like.
So how would that change with the new? What would you like in a new operating system that isn't there now?
The stuff in the Lisp machine.
Like, let's forget about Linux. Let's forget about Windows. We've already forgot about Windows. Let's forget about. Sorry, Microsoft. If you want to sponsor Techendo, you can reach me at this address. Anyway, and let's forget about Mac, right? Because let's be honest, they're dead anyway. Like they're gone.
Yeah. What is Mac?
Well, I mean, today, kids that grow up in this environment don't even care about those operating systems. They matter to us because we're old and we grew up in them.
Kids these days with their Minecraft and their dubstep.
So can I partition this into two different places?
Yeah.
Operating systems for developers and people who are in that camp, who would like to play and hack on their operating systems, who would appreciate things like an operating system that can self-modify, and
Why can't those be one and the same?
Because I think they want two very, very different things. So, for example, people have been talking about, like the tablet revolution, right? And how the PC is dead because everyone is going to use a tablet.
But see, you're not talking about change. You're talking about sustaining two cultures user levels that already exist.
No.
But I'm talking about, like, should what we have now change, and how could it change?
So I think it should change, but I'm saying it's going to change differently for those different two groups of people. So, like, the reason I'm never going to use a tablet is because right now it can't do what I want. But I think the PC, or like the way we deal with operating systems today, could also change. So, for example, different ways of, and I think actually the biggest thing is not necessarily the operating systems, but the input devices. The input devices, I think, are what need the most revolution to enable the operating system to do more. So if you see what was happening in like Park and all of that stuff, and a lot of the new types of like user interaction with operating systems, a lot of it was based around prediction. A lot of it was based around like telling you what you want in a Google Now kind of way. Well, this is what you want. So instead of a desktop metaphor where it's like a desk and there are papers on it, and each window is in essence a sheet of paper, and I pick it up and I move them around, it's no longer that. It's more like the secretary metaphor, where there's somebody who can then just give you what you want because they know what you want. That, I think, is something that could be a huge change.
Now, are you conflating operating systems with user interface? Because that's kind of a...
Well, I think it's operating system versus experience.
Well, what are we talking about? Because there are two very different things.
No, but I think they're one in the same. I think operating systems are experiences. And I think there's one that's passive and one that's active. And I think the future is active. I think it is about servicing you as a user and understanding what you want. And, like, I think the past is the past where you look for something or search for something or place something somewhere and then forget about it, and it's just this thing that exists like a room where you store things, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the future should be different than how we interface with computers today.
I absolutely think so. We have had a keyboard and a mouse for a very long time. The keyboard might stay, but the mouse can go. I think the mouse is going to be the first thing out. We're seeing that with touchscreens. Which has been the first thing to start phasing out a mouse. I think we can do better than that. Facial recognition, gesture recognition, things like that. It's not going to be what you saw with IBM's research projects where you're going like this to move things around. It's going to be more subtle than that. But we will have the technology to do things that are more subtle than that. Where we can just sort of look at the computer. And I mean, people are talking about wearable computing. So, you can put something in your head to eventually actually control your operating system. If something like Google Glass, which is more acceptable to the general population, becomes acceptable, you could interface with your operating system from, say, glasses on your face.
Yeah.
You don't need a mouse. You might not even need a keyboard anymore. That could open a whole world of like a completely different paradigm for computing.
Right.
But I think it starts with the interface, like the human-to-computer interface, before the desktop metaphor changes.
Any thoughts?
I would actually kind of take a more jaded view, which is
I love that.
I think that before, like, I'm actually pretty disappointed with the base feature that operating systems give now, like especially around like data storage. Like, we shouldn't have to care about backups or like keeping files around. Like, that should have been solved already. Plan 9 did like a really amazing job at handling that and making that go away, but we don't have that. And so I think before we can get into like this amazing feature where we have these better interfaces, I think we need a better foundation. We've got a pretty like rickety foundation now where it's like files can just disappear and you have to back up into like 12 places.
No one's called sync on the drive. Oh god, you expect forward to leave your hard drive.
Right. If we do want a future where operating systems or our environment just changes completely, we need to address everything from the bottom up.
I won't say from the bottom up. I'd say we have to. First of all, like, I don't think that we can actually, like, all of us have computers that still have term cap files in them. Like, when we're opening them up, a terminal, it's still a VT100, like an emulator. We're literally emulating 1970s hardware.
Yeah.
I think taking away some of those messy abstraction layers would be very helpful. But I think just fundamentally, like, making it like, it's interesting if you read in the setup. like uses this website. Some of the like most, who was it? Was it maybe Alan Kay and one of the guys who worked on Go? Like some of these guys were like brilliant hackers. When they asked the question at the bottom, like, what type of computer do you want? And he's like, I want to never have to care about like where my data is or where it's stored. I want to be able to like throw my computer away, pick up a new one, and have everything back where it was.
Right.
And with Plan 9, they were pretty much there. Sun was getting there with like their thin client stuff with like the sun rays.
You think it was just too ahead of its time? I mean, it's marketing? Or?
No, I think it's part of like I think part of these things didn't work as well because bandwidth wasn't as cheap or fast as it is now.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that there is room for a new operating system?
Yeah, I mean, where new means things that we've already done. Like, I think that enough variables have changed where these.
Well, sure. I mean, look at the iPhone, right? It's really derivative of things that have come before it.
Right. I mean, we're all using computers that were designed at zero.
But it's only successful because it exists now in a time and place where something like that can be successful and cheap and thin.
Right. And I also think that like before we can have new crazy metaphors, people have to be able to deal with the ones we have now. Like
Sure.
the desktop metaphor was needed to get people off of paper and pen.
Right.
Yeah.
So, which is also kind of like why, like, before we get too fancy with our UI, I still feel like
We have a nice to-do list.
we have a nice to-do list,
Yeah,
and
agreed.
and I think our to-do list is basically stuff that's happened in the past. Like, let's take the stuff that was kind of lost or that we're not doing.
Well,
right now.
ironically enough, we have gone full circle in the way it's worked, right? Because when we started this whole nonsense, it was they were dumb terminals connected to a mainframe,
Right.
And then it totally went over to and then we everything was totally localized, and now we're coming back,
Right.
Because we have bandwidth now,
Yeah.
and we can do that now,
Yeah.
And so we quite literally have gone 360 degrees,
Yeah.
But we can do it in a new way now because we have new technology. So it might be a time to actually go back and solve perhaps some of those problems that we never solved and bring the rest of it that hasn't quite been brought over yet over there too. Because remember, we're like 80% of the way there, or maybe like 50% of the way there, and we need to move the rest over.
So I think we should keep that subject open, and maybe we'll come back to that in a later episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Cheers.
there is time for change, and we need to figure out how to do it. Really.
Cool.